Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. We're through the second week of Dragonflight Season 3, and I wanted to do an update to my solo shuffle PvP tier list. How are the specializations unfolding? How powerful are they going to be? Which ones are going to be able to deliver you the best results? And of course, if you want to stay up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. But let's get started. Affliction Warlock. Well, you do have a surprisingly high amount of damage, and the faster dampening pace is definitely beneficial to you in this bracket. You are likely going to notice a lot of frustrations, only having one school of magic, and with the plethora of demon hunters and death knights that are going to be running you down. Now, in the hands of the best players, you are certainly going to be able to make this specialization work, but if you're a beginner or a newbie, it is probably going to be one of the most infuriating kind of modes to try and go through in solo shuffle. So for me, I'm putting it onto A tier. I think the higher dampening rate, and if you're at a high skill cap, can definitely work for you, but it's very lobby dependent. If you get all casters, you're going to dominate. If it's all melee, you got to play out of your mind, and even then you might really struggle if there's things like Resto, Shamans healing all the melee DPS as well. But I think in the hands of the best players, you can definitely make it work. Arcane Mage, similar problems to Affliction, not beginner friendly, definitely more for an advanced player who's looking to invest time with it, but it will definitely deliver results. Now, Arcane is excellent at dealing with melee DPS, which is obviously going to be one of the most popular DPS types to be bringing into the bracket. For me, I think Arcane is onto the A+. It's a little better than Affliction. I think that its burst damage and ability to control the end of a match is better, and that's definitely important in solo shuffle. Affliction is going to feel more reliant on your teammates to stay alive long enough for your damage to finally start to do some work. Now, Arms Warrior has surprisingly been feeling very weak to me. Sometimes you're getting these massive mortal strikes. It could be a matter of me not having my 4-piece yet. Perhaps when it gets its 4-piece, it ends up performing a bit better. But it seems to be struggling. I feel like a lot of the other melee DPS either just outpace you or can just kite you. Mages and Death Knights just spamming Chains of Ice and snares on you and kiting away from you is really frustrating. I actually think Arms Warrior is a bit lower. I'm putting it here onto B tier. I think Arms Warrior is definitely, or maybe A tier. It's somewhere between B and A. Maybe I should have put a B+. Obviously, I'm going to need even more segments here. We'll leave it on B for now, and we'll go from there. Assassination, really sleeper spec at the moment. King's Bane damage is definitely through the roof. If you have not tried that Assassination build, you certainly need to. However, its defensives are a little bit more lacking. You're a little bit squishier, and rogues are generally weaker in solo shuffle. So for me, I'm putting it on B tier. But I definitely think that it has potential. It's probably the easiest rogue spec to do well with in the bracket as well. Even though overall its ranking is going to be lower, it's more beginner friendly. Balanced Druid, I'm putting this on God tier, and you guys keep telling me it's not, and I keep winning every lobby at 2,500 MMR, going like 5-1, and there's going to be a solo shuffle tournament this weekend, and this tier list is going to be able to play out a little bit in real time. It'll be nice to directly compare it against that event with the Void.gg tournament, but I'm expecting to see a Balanced Druid in the finals, which if you're in the finals, you're on this upper end for sure. Beast Mastery Hunter, this is a really easy spec to do well with right now. It just does so much damage with the new Master's Call ability, just summoning in extra pets and watching them all AoE people down. It's just this is the pet patch. I don't know if I want to put this on S or God, because I feel like you can die and you don't have as much control as Balanced Druid to help your teammates. So I'm putting it a little bit lower, although I think if you're a beginner, you'll have way more success on Beastmaster than Balanced Druid, for example. Probably if you've never played the game before, this is going to be the best spec to do well with. But overall, at the highest level of play, I could see you having some difficulty with the way that the meta, I think, unfolds at the higher level. Blood Death Knight, this spec is actually good, but it's tough for me to rank, tank against everything else. It's definitely better than you would expect. It's doing a lot more damage, but I wouldn't say Arms and Blood, you're going to struggle to climb as a tank. Just tank ratings are generally lower on average. Same thing with Brewmaster. The damage is much higher for this patch for the tank specs, but you're still going to notice it's really harder to climb in solo shuffle bracket. Demonology Warlock, I'm putting this onto S tier. I think that this is the best Warlock spec at the moment. You have some of the strongest set bonuses that are providing you upwards of 10+% damage. Absolutely crazy. It's the pet patch, like I said. But I think if you're in these melee DPS lobbies, it can be a bit more difficult. Although you're probably the best lock spec of all the lock specs to deal with them. It's definitely S or God. I might even put it a bit higher than Beastmaster at the highest skill cap, but Beastmaster is just way easier to play and get more effective damage out than it is for Demonology. But at the highest level of play, I think Demonology is really good, and it's especially good into things like Subtlety Rogue, which I think at the highest level is definitely still going to be prominent, similar to last season for Solo Shuffle when we saw in the tournaments. But definitely do not underrate this spec. Destruction Warlock, I think Destruction Warlock is like an A+. Along with Arcane, you've got multiple schools of magic with it, which is nice. Although weirdly enough, right now your 4-piece bonus is actually a DPS loss. If you spawn a Fire Rift, it actually does less damage than a normal Rift. So you probably don't want to get your 4-piece. I've been trying to figure out, along with Vinruki, what the worst 4-piece bonus is, and I think Destro, when it's actually a net loss of damage, has to be the worst, the worst set bonus. In the game. Devastation Evoker, surprisingly good. I think it's because it's good into these melee DPS, stacking them up and bursting them down with massive AoE and cleave, but it still feels a little bit limited. Your minimum range, leaves you susceptible to being attacked in a lot of situations. Not as durable as a lot of the other classes. I'd say you're probably like an A or a B. Maybe put on A. I think it'll be easier to do well as Affliction or as Devastation than Affliction, but it's definitely on the lower end overall. Discipline Priest, for Solo Shuffle, I think that this is a God tier specialization. I just got 2400 on mine. It feels really strong at the moment, although your 4-piece set bonus, at least with my build, is not particularly great. I think the main reason Disc is so good is that it's just not really a target. You can get away with running a lot less versatility and still not be a target in a lot of cases. Main problem is mana. I have noticed, although if you play more mana-oriented builds and play around being more conservative, you can definitely keep going alongside the Resto Druids and stuff like that. But most of the time when you're comparing Disc to any healer that isn't a Resto Druid, it's like you're pretty dominant. Elemental Shaman, I want to put this on S, but I also think it could be A+. Ellie with the 4-piece bonus is just doing a remarkable amount of damage, just insane. You just Flame Shock Lava Burst. It's really easy to play, similar to Beast Mastery, and has really effective play at the highest level. It supports its teammates through off healing, through Ancestral Guidance, and through Earth Shield and Healing Stream Totems. That's where your support's going to be coming. And you really need to abuse your knockbacks. Things like the Unleashed Shield and Thunderstorm and possibly even Static Field Totem. It's the knockbacks that really enables Shaman in this bracket to kind of carry against melee DPS, and that's where I see a lot of people struggling, is they're not using those knockbacks. Enhancement Shaman, I actually don't think the specialization is very good. I think it's complete casino spec. You're either proccing Ascendance and kind of dominating around, or you're not doing a lot, and you don't really synergize with a lot of specs in the game. And the damage is not through the roof to where I think like that's carrying you as well. And even the support and healing elements of it, you got more instant healing than Ellie, but you almost always want to be spending your Maelstrom on damage. I feel like it's not that great. It doesn't have a lot of synergy. Pharaoh with the regrowth buffs, definitely going to be doing a little bit better in Shuffle, but I'm still kind of putting it down a little bit lower. I think it's really squishy. Demon Hunters, Death Knights can kind of run you down, but you can also just counter cleave them. Maybe it's a little bit higher than that. Is it here? Is it a little higher? This is a hard one. Feral is a hard one. It's got more flexibility than Enhance because it's more synergized with other classes and has mortal wounds and has better crowd control like Cyclone. So I'm putting it on A. Putting it a little bit higher on A. Fire Mage. We saw some changes, so now you don't have to run the Glass Cannon build, but I feel like a lot of Fire Mages still do. I've seen more Arcane, I think. I think Fire, now is probably one of the lesser represented specs in Shuffle. I'm tossing it down onto B for now. Although I think it's a lot easier to play. Might be one of the easiest specs to play in the bracket because all the damage is instant. Try and stay max range and spam fireballs. The playstyle of it is a bit easier, but at the highest level, I feel like Hunters, even like these durable caster specs, are really difficult to deal with, and can kind of make matches go on and you aren't able to find those win conditions. Frost is a lot better, but not particularly insane. I don't think it's on Arcane's level just yet. I'm putting it here on A. I think when you get like multiple melee DPS, you feel really good. And with all the buffs that just came through to things like Frostbomb, main problem is healers that know how to play around it and just dispel Frostbomb. you're going to start to notice a little bit less damage. But I think there is wiggle room for this spec to have some opportunity since the buffs. Frost Death Knight, tossing it down here onto C tier along with enhancement. Again, synergy is the problem. It can be really good against melee cleaves where you can stack enemies together, but if you're not finding those opportunities to stack melee DPS or even casters together, then you're feeling really lackluster and you don't have like a tremendous amount of synergy with other specs, unfortunately, at the moment with the bracket. And I don't think that your damage is like so high that it's compensating for those limitations. Fury Warrior, I really didn't like this spec after playing it for a while in Solo Shuffle. Maybe with the 4-piece we could compare it to Arms, but I really want to put it down here. I'm not gonna lie, like better than Enhance, but next better than Frost. But I feel like Fury is. I'm gonna try it again when I do get the 4-piece bonus. But even with just the 2-piece, it felt more frustrating than anything else. It just felt like you couldn't move on the map, and you couldn't build as much pressure as something like a Demon Hunter. It just felt like a weaker version of a Demon Hunter. Guardian Druid, I feel like it might be one of the worst tanks. I don't think its damage output is like incredibly high. Havoc Demon Hunter, this is a tough one because I think you are directly countered in some situations, but other than that, it's pretty obvious it's God tier, right? I think against Subtlety Rogues with no voice is both a blessing and a curse because the rogue is less coordinated, but you are also less coordinated. But if you get a lot of preemptive defensive cooldown uses against a rogue, I think you can still do well in those lobbies, and obviously you're great in a whole bunch of situations. Holy Priest, you are trash. I'm just throwing you down here in the seat. Even with the 6% healing buff, you have worse mana, worse damage, worse healing. The only redeeming factor is Spirit of Redemption, where you can go immune to crowd control and get some healing out, but after that you're crying in the corner. Holy Priest is being pathetically weak so far on this patch. Holy Paladin, I think it's probably like an A+. It's really good now on mana. If you're running Hodge Repentance builds, you can really crowd control and bully a lot of healers in the game, but Druid and Priest are still likely going to be doing a little bit better than you. Priest being able to purge off your effects like Blessing of Protection, Divine Shield, pumping out more damage than you. Resto Druid just being able to last you and avoid things like Repentance by shapeshifting, and by having a little bit more instant cast healing. But Holy Paladin is definitely a lot better since the mana re-nerfs, mana unnerfs that came to it. Marksmanship Hunter, this guy is not doing so well. This might come as a bit of surprise where I'm about to put this, but Marksmanship Hunter, if it's like a double dip nerf or whatever, we're gonna have to wait until we get the 4-piece bonus all the way through, but every Marksmanship Hunter I've seen so far has not been doing well. It's either a C or very low B. I'll put it on a very low B. I think it's just like lingering thoughts of how powerful it was before, but it feels a lot weaker in comparison to Beast Mastery. Beast Mastery has leaps beyond all the other Hunter specs for this patch. Mistweaver Monk, I'm putting this onto S tier. I think if you can flex between Fist Weaving and Caster Mistweaver, which is tough because you need 2 sets of gear, if you can flex between both of those playstyles in a lobby, you are really good in a lot of different situations. You can counter a lot of different specializations because of that. And you're generally weaker against mages and hunters, but marksman's not doing so well. A lot of mage specs aren't doing so well, and you're really good into warlocks, and those specs are doing a lot better on this patch. And you're a great melee DPS healer as well, just with raw throughput and with disarm, being the only healer with disarm. So I think Mistweaver is definitely doing remarkably well. Outlaw Rogue, this is a tough one. If I want to put it on S or on God tier, I think I'm going to put it on S. For now, I could see Outlaw Rogue doing well in a Solo Shuffle tournament. I think most people are probably going to prioritize going after Subtlety. It just does a really high amount of damage, has really good control in this patch. I super underrated it moving into this patch, and now having seen it come through with the live changes, it's definitely a lot better than what I had expected. Preservation Evoker, this is probably the only healer I think that is worse than Holy Priest. Probably the worst healer in the game for Solo Shuffle. You have to compromise your positioning with no real significant benefit. You're really susceptible to just getting spam CC'd. The damage on it, I think, still feels good. That's the one positive element of it, but it feels like I struggle to keep up with the throughput that Mistweavers or Holy Paladins or Resto Druids have, while compromising your position so much. So it's definitely weaker on this turnaround. Prot Warrior, I'm putting it a little bit higher. I think it just does a little bit more damage than the other tanks at the moment, which is really the only measure that you can compare for the tanks in this bracket. Prot Paladin, we're not ranking because you only fight against other Prot Paladins. Resto Shaman. This guy is super underrated. I've been having a lot of fun on this. I got 2100 in full greens. I just logged on to Honor Vendor and just went in and started playing. And it was like, how did I just get 2100 in full greens? Like, I'm struggling on Warrior right now, and I've got multiple epics at like 1950, and I was 2400 on Warrior last season. So there's some specializations that I think are definitely sleeper good. I'm putting Resto Shaman on A for now. I think it's pretty close to Holy Paladin. Definitely there's a big jump from Preservation and Holy to Resto Shaman, but there's also a big jump from Shaman to Disc or Druid for sure. And again, it might be a little bit lobby dependent. If you get a cleave lobby, you're going to feel weaker than almost every other healer in a cleave matchup. But if you get caster lobbies or any amount of casters, you feel really good in those situations. Resto Druid, obviously God tier, I think it's the best healer in the bracket, although Disc is really close. Once you get your 4-piece, you're just completely unstoppable. They need to do something about being able to apply regrowth to your allies through line of sight. There's a talent that when you regrowth yourself and allies have life bloom, it applies a regrowth hot to your allies, and then that procs your 4-set bonus, which triggers a nourish at 100% of its value. And I think both those effects heal through pillars. So the only time you ever need to cast, you're healing out of line of sight, and it's just laying handsing the whole team. It's really broken mechanically. That just needs to be looked at. Retribution Paladin, I'm putting this on S tier. I think that this spec is really good. I don't know about God tier. I think that you can be kited or out damaged by the specs that are here onto the God tier or out setup base, but it's just a really solid spec at the moment, with a lot of great utility for its teammates, and honestly, decent synergy. I'd feel like your synergies are lacking with Mage, but Mage is not really doing that well, so it's not going to be as popular. So you don't really have to worry about that. But even when you match up with mages, I think going after healers ends up actually being a really good strategy for you. Shadow, this is a tough one. I feel like Shadow is really struggling, even with the most recent damage buff output. I'm putting it a little bit lower here onto A tier, with a 2-minute cooldown Mass Dispel. Not really a lot of extra help for the teammates. Damage is okay. You can win with Psyfiend. Like Psyfiend goes with Void Form, but it feels really tough to carry on it for this patch so far. So I think it's just because melee DPS are so prominent. Windwalkers especially are really tough to deal with. Subtlety Rogue, we're putting this up on the God tier. I think that if we had a Soul Shuffle tournament, it would probably be some combination of these 3 specs, maybe even not the Demon Hunter, honestly, in a tournament. I think that Boomkins and Rogues get so much control that it would actually maybe be tough for them to do well. A Survival Hunter, I think, is honestly doing better than Marks at this point, but I don't think it's doing remarkably better than Marks. I think Beast Mastery is going to feel a couple leaps ahead of it, but it's definitely doing well. Unholy Death Knight, this is a tough one, whether or not I want to say it's God or it's S. I'm taking a risk here. No, I think it's S. I think not having MS means that you can get some lobbies where it's tougher to do well. But if you synergize so well with Death Knight or with Demon Hunters that when you get lobbies like that, you're just running everybody over. But if you get lobbies that don't have a Demon Hunter and you get casters that you don't really synergize with, I think it can be a little bit more of a struggle. So I'm giving it a little bit lower of a ranking, although it's definitely remarkably powerful. Vengeance Demon Hunter, this is going to be a surprise for some people, but this is the best tank spec in the bracket. Putting it on God tier. You have an insane amount of crowd control. This is a super slept on specialization, really broken now with the lower cooldown sigils that they introduced, like double sigils or something like that. Really broken, super underrated. Windwalker Monk might come as a surprise as well. I think maybe we put it on A+. I don't know. Sometimes I see this spec and it absolutely just wins every game, smashing. Other times I see Windwalker Monks and it just doesn't even seem like it's good. And maybe that's a player issue. I'll put it onto A+ for now, but I definitely think it's like really close to an S at this point. An Augmentation Evoker, probably the worst range DPS in the game. We're putting it down here. Even with the changes coming through for Upheaval and nerfs to nerfs to Upheaval and buffs to Eruption, it just feels much weaker on this patch so far from what I have seen. It's just not doing comparable damage. Really lobby dependent if you're not buffing up a really particularly good class like a Demon Hunter, and even then I've noticed it doesn't really win. Every time I've seen it, they're not doing well. So Augmentation Evoker definitely down here, not doing super hot. And this is kind of my assessment right now for week 2. I just wanted to keep you guys up to date. I said that I'd be running this tier list. I think weekly, based on when they do updates and stuff like that, is a good strategy. So I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. It's got your brain going in terms of what is looking good or powerful for this patch. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.